I am a North Haven resident. I have a child that was in the North Haven school system. I'm a longtime resident. I actually went through North Haven school systems myself, as well as my sisters. My parents have lived in the town for over 65 years, as well as my grandparents who held land here as well. The mascot issue is really near and dear to my heart because just growing up with a quote unquote Indian caricature or mascot in the town, I have to say, when I was going through it, didn't necessarily bother me. It didn't necessarily offend me. And the reason why is because I was really rich in our culture. Growing up in the tribe, just knowing who you are, where you came from, I kind of found it funny, that this thing was kind of representing the schools. At the time, we were the only Native family that we knew of in town. I went to Monowese Elementary School, and I was one of very, very few children of color within the school. I consider myself a Black Indian as well. So as a Black person, I was the only Black child within the elementary school of Monowese for many, many years. So I usually looked for my culture and my identity from my family and not necessarily from the schools. However, I have to say that, in years when you grow up and you start to learn and really educate yourself on the imagery that affects you, not just even mascots, but social media, the presence of different identities in society, and really how the things that impact you, you start to look and shape things very, very differently. So I must say that for me, I was very guarded just because I'm the youngest of three, or four rather, I'm the fourth, the youngest of four. I was very guarded because my sisters had already been through the school system. We already had relationships with many teachers, principals, administrators. So for me, it was very different. For my child, it was extremely stressful. So that's kind of my background and why I got involved with this mascot issue a couple of years ago when Talia presented, and everything kind of just spoke to me. It was a cause that I really think is worth exploring, and there's so many different perspectives on it. But I'll let you guys share and kind of talk a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Dana.
You're welcome.
I actually have a similar experience as you. I see. I was adopted. I was aware of my heritage, and but I was raised in another. So I was proud of it, and I learned of my heritage as time went on, and then the advent of DNA, because lots of people say lots of things. Although I do have a birth certificate that didn't have my heritage, it's from another country. It wasn't really all that wasn't in English. And my DNA did confirm what we thought I was, and I didn't have an issue with it in the beginning, much like many people, until I actually had, and I did take care of someone with similar heritage who pointed it out very quickly, and she's like, "I know what you are," and we had a discussion about this over a long period of time, and she really explained to me why this was a problem. And even if I didn't think so, that maybe I needed to open my mind a little bit, and she needed to explain some of my history because I was not raised in it. And it definitely had a very strong impact on me. And she said, if it bothers most of us, why would you not stand up for us? And she had a point. Honor, duty, respect. It's a respect thing. And I did I did a lot more digging and a lot more speaking with her, and I realized the gravity, and I learned a little bit more about the history. And the more that I learned, the more I became upset that, well, I was the product of basically white influence that was hiding all of these things and all of these negativities within having a mascot like this. And what does that mean? And the history of using our name, using the name Indian to separate us, and the history of that, because we're many different nations. We are not one. that's how they preferred, that's how all of us had preferred to be called, by our tribal names. And they took that away. They took away our identity. And that's why I find it interesting when many people support this mascot in New Haven that we're taking away their identity. Well, no, that name was given to take away ours. And that's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. So
Exactly.
having that education was vitally important. You don't know what you don't know. So I spent many years learning and being quiet and listening to other people and drastically changing my view. Even if it doesn't have that much of a feeling for some of us, the fact that it has such a visceral one on others is enough for me to support that fully. But that name was given to silence us and erase us. So we're not erasing North Haven's history. That name is erasing our history, and
Exactly.
that's that's something that I can't stand behind. And the fervor that's come of this, I've had people come to my home. So when the school board says that we don't want to have a vote because it's gotten really scary, well, how do you think it feels for us natives? So your comfort level versus me, and I have a child who the school board is supposed to have their interest at heart. You're putting a child in that uncomfortable position for your own to ease your own discomfort. That's
Right.
not acceptable. That's not honorable. That's what about us? So we're at the
What
expense
about us?
because you felt uncomfortable on Facebook. That's not right to me.
Right.
I'm sorry. Took up a lot of time.
No, I mean you're right on point, and I think that's the whole point. Is that
Me
even
too.
more so than myself, it's really for our future generations and our current generations. We have children that are in the school system. We have children that are being impacted right now. The term Indian came out from Columbus, who tended to be lost. He was completely lost, just thought he was in India and decided to name the people here that he encountered, and not even in America, but in South America, and other islands. He decided to name them Indians, and the name kind of stuck because this man was lost. And so it is a term that, doesn't necessarily represent us at all as Indigenous people, as Native people. Like you said, I kind of tend to refer to the tribal names, tribal nations that I'm associated with. My family spans generations that are made up of many, many different tribes, much like your own. We have a very small community that tends to marry and stay within our own communities, whether it's for safety or personal preference, whatever it is. But I too, like you, Eliane, I spoke out about this in 2015. My daughter, my family, and I actually went to a board meeting that was held. I think it was the high school at the time. Might have been the middle school. I'm not even sure. I don't remember. But there was a lot of people there. The atmosphere was very, very tense. People were extremely passionate about keeping the name and the imagery. And it was really, really challenging. At times, it got really disruptive and very aggressive. I then chose to speak out to the Board of Ed individually, to just kind of state my case, just because I really didn't feel as though that atmosphere was the best. And I brought along my daughter, who also spoke to the Board of Ed as well. Following that meeting, from the time that it aired, from the time I actually spoke that evening to the time that it aired, and then even, in years it's actually aired on repeat, my house was broken into. We did get death threats. It was really, really intense. And it was all about just, because we spoke out and spoke up for ourselves, defending ourselves and the imagery that we wanted to be represented as Native people. And it's not really fair that, especially in this town, that in a time where you would think that people would be able to at least voice their opinions, that you're met with threats and vandalism and attacks and different things. And so I think the Board of Ed kind of pulled back and shied back from the issue because they were afraid. But it was something, it was a cause that, we had to really put ourselves out there for and be open to sacrifice, because this can't continue. I mean, the Time Act was a long time ago and it's still coming up, and it's still, being talked about even now. We're not afraid. We're not afraid by any of those people. We know that they are cowards. They work in the dark. They try to work in silence. But modern technology has kept up to them. We have cameras and all kinds of things around us to protect us now. But it shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be that way at all. Knowing that North Haven could possibly be on the wrong side of history is really, it's just sad. It's really sad that they've actually chosen to retire the imagery, but not the name. Names have words, names have power. You can talk about names and learn names, and, whether the softest of names, like a flower, you don't have to think of or see a flower in order to that imagery to come up. But even, the harshest names of, stereotypical and racial epithets, and the images just come up automatically. So to retire the imagery without the name is really useless, and I think it's pretty cowardice.
I agree. It is very cowardice. It's a way to try to placate both parties to say, see, we compromised in the middle, but it's not really something to compromise about
Right.
at all.
No.
To go on to piggyback on your theory on what's in a name, if we think back to the civil rights in the 60s, how many people today would call someone with African or Black heritage a Negro? Would you say that to someone?
Or colored.
Yeah. You wouldn't. And you know what? There are people who still prefer that name who are Black, because that was a preferred. So using that excuse, well, there's people. I know 2 Indians who think that this is a good idea. Well, but that doesn't mean it should be done, because we retire these names. We retire them as we know better, we do better. So if we were able to retire that, and it was the same turmoil back then, to retire this is not too big of a leap. It's you have to expect that there's going to be some sort of discourse, and doing the right thing is never easy, it is never neat, and it is never clean. But yet it still needs to be done. And also,
if you look to the elementary schools, I'm sorry to cut you off, but if you look to the elementary schools have already retired the name. They all have their own individual mascot. You have the penguins and the hawks and different things. And so the elementary schools are already starting in the right direction as far as even educating the children that come up. It's not really until they encounter the junior high and high school level that they're forced to then comply to this racist mascot issue and name. So it's kind of interesting that the elementary schools would actually make that decision, in opposition to the Board of Ed, or maybe even support of it, to actually change that as well. And it's about our children.
It is, which I think people who are against this, and I can certainly understand that. I can certainly feel that this is part of their heritage, in a sense, their nostalgia, this paradigm of youth, of culture, of pride. It's like we're fighting the same issue, but on different ends for the same exact reasons. Only one of them actually is our culture, and the other is just a concept of it. But those who are against it, you really have to think to yourself, why is this important enough for me to make threats to our neighbors, to houses where children live in? Why is this important enough? Am I willing to go to jail for this? Am I willing to terrify children because of something I did in high school? It's really beyond oneself, and you have to think, like, I can understand if you don't like it, if you have your opinion. This is what America is. You should be allowed to give that dissenting opinion, but it does not give you the right to bully people of color, or anyone for that matter, and also expect for them to back down. That's just not. It's a discussion. It's a learning opportunity. It's from us to learn from you, and you to learn from us. It goes
Mhm.
both ways. So I don't think any I don't think any Native person here in town has ever threatened someone over this, but yet we keep getting issues, and that's appalling to me in so many ways. So if you're in
We
that
are in the
mindset,
minority as far as numbers. We are in
uh,
the majority of people, I think, in town, as well as the people in the schools, actually would prefer to maintain the current status quo. However, it's not really the right thing to do. This isn't a matter of right and well, it is a matter of right and wrong, but it's also a matter of human rights, of civil rights. North Haven actually has a responsibility to provide a safe an educational atmosphere for all children. And for my children, for your children as well, my child, it's not a safe or educational environment whatsoever. There's not a time and place that the school system actually even has a curriculum to educate about Native Americans that are Eastern Woodland Indians, to
No,
know about our indigenous cultures, the cultures
no,
that are,
there's not. There is not.
our,
No,
our,
there.
our
That's what I was
tribes that
waiting
are
for
just
someone
here
to
in
say.
Connecticut
There's not.
alone.
So,
Yeah,
but
across
I.
our nation. Go ahead, Rachel.
So what I want to jump in and say, and nobody's brought this to maybe to the board, and I might not make a lot of friends by saying this, but it doesn't matter. Um, I, so they're so aggressive to keep this the Indians, right, and go Indians, okay, but where is that same energy applied to teaching the native culture in the schools? You ask kids that are in middle school and high school what the Trails of Tears was, they tell you we don't know. That is sad. That is awful.
Or
They're
even
teaching
King
these kids
Philip's War.
they're teaching these kids history across the world. They don't need to know what happened before they find out what happened here. They're
Right.
not teaching traditions and cultures from here. They're not putting that same energy. Speaking to a lot of North Haven residents, with that anger, that aggression. Oh, I want to keep and I have family members from North Haven too. And oh, I want to, they want to keep the Indians. It's more of a convenient thing because they're used to it. You know what I mean? You're used to it. That was, so just because you're used to something and something is convenient for you doesn't make it right. They were used to slavery. Slavery was convenient, but it wasn't right. So to keep a mascot representing culture is not right. Nobody's ever heard the term "my culture is not your mascot." That's.
Very true. And the fact that it's actually just a caricature. I mean, it's been kind of revised in many, many different ways. They've changed the
Right.
headdress. They've changed certain things about the facial features and that sort of thing. But overall, it's a caricature. It doesn't
And they
represent
won't even
any.
educate. They won't educate these
They
kids
will.
on a headdress. On a headdress for Halloween. Little kids walk around wearing a headdress, not knowing what the meaning behind it is. That's sad.
I've just been
Or at least a
informed that
replica.
years ago, I've just been informed that years ago the yearbook was called the Trail of Memories. I mean,
Oh,
that's, I'm glad that's changed.
yeah.
That's
Um,
horrible.
That's a
That's
bit
actually
mocking.
horrible.
That's the way
but
to.
Yeah.
That's to mock a
to
culture.
create,
It's just that's what it is.
But they
so
don't
we want to
educate
create an
anything even on
organization.
just the town of North Haven. I mean, the fact that, I live in Monowese community, they never talk about the chief Monowese, Sachem Monowese, the Quinnipiac culture, the Quinnipiac tribe. They don't talk about any of these things. They just kind of
No.
do their own little portrayal. It's
Mhm.
actually just on Friday, my daughter was showing me some images on Instagram of some North Haven residents that she was following on Instagram, and they all had face paint on at one of the games. And they like to say, oh, we don't do that anymore and we don't wear these things anymore, but they do. They
Yes, we
continue
do.
to do it. The children still continue to do it without even realizing the really strong ramifications of their actions. Our Native youth have the highest suicide rates out of any ethnic group.
Yeah.
The challenges that our youth actually face. And it's not just the imagery, but it's about what that imagery teaches and what that imagery actually shows as a sign of disrespect to the culture, to them, and saying that, you know what? you're worthless. This is just as much as we think about you. It's always stereotypical. It's never an accurate depiction of the natives that actually occupied that land since the time of colonization.
And this is
And
what I'm
it's definitely
saying.
not honoring.
And this is what I'm saying, this is something, we have, so primarily not only North Haven, but in the region around this area, a lot of I don't want to say racist or derogatory marks, but there's a lot of inappropriate, comments, um, that get made. And like I said, the way that everybody is putting in this energy to fight to keep the Indians as the mascot, why are you not applying that same energy to teach the history behind it? And if that history is taught behind it, maybe their minds will think a little different than keeping that mascot.
Absolutely.
Creating change is a very multifactorial endeavor. It involves just any organizational to change is difficult, but it involves many, many different things that are synergistic and working together, such as curriculum changes and educational educators who support these kind of changes as well. Change for change's sake, diversity for diversity's sake does not work. It has to be a complete paradigm shift, and it has to come from the top. And they have to truly believe that this is worth it. And I think that's part of what this forum is as well. That this is something that's truly worth it, and you need to have that buy-in coming from the top levels. Otherwise, you cannot enact any type of organizational change. It doesn't it doesn't take root if you don't have that basis there. If you simply have the paradigm, well, we're going to change when the state makes us change when it's required. That's not going to work. You're going to have a lot of dissent. So this is what I'm asking the people who are watching this, those who are in those positions, those who are in leadership, is ask yourself on why this is important to you. And do you truly believe that this is something that needs to be done? Or have you still not yet been convinced? And if you are convinced, because there has been quite a lot of education, and if you're not convinced, but you're simply a little bit frightened, then you need to look within yourself and what type of leader are you? The Golden Hill Augusta asked North Haven to retire the mascot and name. And North Haven decided that we were going to educate to this. They were directly asked to stop by several Native organizations. And yet it's like, wow, we still need to think some more. We still need to get more education. You're educators. You have the information. You are not educating yourselves or not buying into it. And you're not educating the children. And you're not truly committing to something that is important, which is a disservice in any form of leadership. So like Rachel said, there's very, very little to let people know. And it's not only for the older people who are out of school, but also for the children. These kids are the next generation. Why are we teaching them the wrong information? We need to make change not for change's sake, because it is the right thing to do. And you need to actually believe that and look within yourself and look at what Native people are trying to tell you. It's extraordinarily important for a variety of reasons.
Right.
And also to the fact that I keep hearing it's an honor, it's an honor. And I do appreciate that it's meant to be an honor and why it was done, and that there was no malice in it. However, many tribes don't feel it to be an honor. And there are many tribes who do not subscribe to the aggressive nature. Hopi means peaceful ones. They, you know, and just because I live a life of peace doesn't mean I've forgotten how to be violent. But that doesn't
Right.
mean that
Or
doesn't mean
defend
I
yourself.
right, exactly.
Right.
But I don't want that as a mascot. Like that's not my personality. My sparring is with words. You know, that's what I do. That's what most of us do. That's what civilized people do. So to make us all as if, they're savages and we're trying to show you that, we're great warriors, that's great. But the world isn't made of great warriors. There are all sorts of different people along this. So to put one into that because you think it's a good attribute doesn't mean that everyone thinks that's a good attribute.
Right. Right.
The sad thing is, it's like the Redskins. The Redskins actually didn't change their mascot or their name just because it was the right thing to do. They changed it because their sponsors started dropping out. Their sponsors started deciding that this is not where we want to actually place our money and our influence and our power, our resources. So it was a forced change. We're trying to ask, the North Haven Board of Ed to not force this issue. It's not a forced change. It's a peaceful request. It's a peaceful request from on behalf of the Nipmucks, on behalf of the Narragansetts, the Scatticokes, the Golden Hill Pegussets, the Turkey Hill Pegussets, the Pequots, the Mohegans, our Monowees, our Quinnipiac, all of our native tribes. There's so many of them that actually live in Connecticut. We're calling on the North Haven Board of Ed to make the right decision, be on the right side of history, do it for our children. We don't want our children to grow up in a world that is full of imagery that disrespects them, that puts them into a box, and that subsequently causes our other adults and children around them to treat them horribly. I've been a witness to it. I've encountered it myself. I've had my daughter encounter, as well as my husband. Our family has been detrimentally affected by, just having this, and it goes beyond the mascot. Things like Columbus Day, celebrating Native American Indigenous Peoples Day, is even a start. But we're really calling on you to make the change on behalf of all the tribes in Connecticut. This is what we're asking.
Great. I think that's we need to be the change we want to see.
We need to be
Correct.
the change we want to see. What a beautiful quote. And yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And
Again, I'm not a North Haven resident, but you know, uh, I'm pretty sure, and I've heard this from non-natives all over. It's not right. It's not right. Appreciate Sharon. I love Sharon, the clan mother of the Golden Hill Pagasa tribe. I love her. She's amazing. She continues to fight for natives all over. Um, so it's not a surprise that she, put in for this. She's a very strong voice, and another thing that everybody seems. I have a mask with with the hands, and for our
missing and murdered Indigenous women.
and I get stopped all over, and everyone says, "Oh, what's the hand for?" And to have to stop and explain, everybody, around Connecticut, Cinco de Mayo. I understand it's a great day, but nobody. That's all everybody thinks May 5th is. They don't know. Nobody knows why. Why isn't that something that and with my family and friends in the Carolinas out there, it's very well brought up. It's alive. It's everybody knows. It's aware. The awareness is rising. But here, nobody even knows when you tell them. Nobody
I
even
will
knows.
say it's definitely. I just got back from Charleston, and Native history was quite. I was really surprised at how
Yeah,
well documented it was.
right.
And that city's got a very dark history, so it was. They made a point that the natives were treated
Yeah,
in a way that was not appropriate, as well
right,
as everyone else. So
right,
acknowledging
right.
that history is important. We have to acknowledge that we have a negative history. It doesn't mean we're
Well,
negative.
everybody, on Facebook posts and always put, "Well, let it go. It was in the past. We don't live in the past anymore." But how do
That's
you
how we
have a
learn.
successful future if you do not acknowledge the mistakes from the past and move on from them? I don't know how many
And the
North Haven
sad thing is,
residents,
this is happening in the current,
modern,
in the
right,
modern day era, current day today. This is still going on. It was something that actually started in the past, absolutely,
right,
but it is
right,
something that continues right up to this day. And
right.
that is, just, talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, teaching about the King Philip's War, teaching about the history, Trail of Tears, um, all those things that don't just happen in November, is
Yeah,
really just a start to
yeah,
acknowledge some of the wrong, but also teach the positive within the school system. And that's something that's very simple that could be done in North Haven. letting them know about, modern political movements such as, water protectors and,
Right.
do all kinds of things. There's many, many different things that they could actually support, encourage, and teach, and have a new mascot. Point blank, start by having a new mascot. Be on the right side of history.
Right.
Make it a change that's a change that is positive, but a change that's not necessarily forced down your throat.
I agree.
Unfortunately, I do need to go. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up and just give you my final words before I have to log off.
Sure.
I'm asking the Board of Ed, please retire the name, retire the image, get a new mascot for one reason, because you're leaders. Do the right thing for the children. You know it's the right thing. Now act like the leaders that you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and
Thank
I'll
you.
try that as well. North Haven Board of Ed, I applaud you for your efforts in trying to, retire the actual imagery of the mascot. We're also asking you to retire the name. The name without the imagery just is useless. So please do the right thing. Protect, educate all of our children. Be responsible for the education of all of our children, and find a new mascot.
Yes, I agree. For North Haven Board of Ed to please retire the name and the mascot. It's not right. It's culturally inappropriate. It is offensive. It's hurtful, and it's just it's something that needs to be shown to kids, and adults need to start and be the example, lead by example. Just because something is consistent, just because they're used to something, doesn't mean it's right. It's not right. There are several natives around Connecticut who find it hurtful because it's somewhat mocking history. Um, and again, that same energy that's applied, towards the aggression to keep it, apply that energy to just try and understand. Try to understand the voices that are asking today.
Absolutely. Wonderful to talk to you.
Nice talking to you as
Connie,
well. Good to talk to everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
farewell. Till next time.
Yes.